Hey everybody, it's your boy Jordan J. Adams, United Fight Alliance. Well, it's Carnivore Month here at For the Fighter and You. And to help celebrate, we're going to bring you 3 world-class MDs who all specialize in this nutritional protocol. Dr. Christopher Stadtherr is a board-certified physician in family medicine and obesity medicine with expertise in nutrition and metabolic health. Following completion of medical school and residency at the University of Minnesota, he worked for 3 years in a full-spectrum family medicine clinic, including pediatrics, OB, and inpatient care, before transitioning to full-time hospital medicine. Dr. Stadtherr has been committed to improving the management of diabetes in the hospital setting, with success in reducing glucose levels and insulin requirements for patients, often achieving dramatic results even during short hospital stays. While working as a hospitalist, he served as principal investigator on an inpatient study of the nutritional management of diabetes in the hospital setting and continues to closely follow nutritional research. These efforts with nutrition and lifestyle modifications have renewed his enthusiasm for practicing medicine and continue to be rewarding by being able to help individuals reverse their diabetes, improve their metabolic health, and avoid the myriad complications that necessitate hospitalization. He's a diplomat of the American Board of Obesity Medicine and is a member of the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. He is a contributing author for the popular low-carbohydrate nutrition website, dietdoctor.com. Outside of medicine, he enjoys spending time with his wife and 2 daughters, and some of his many interests, including music, yes, me too, strength training, yes, me too, traveling, me too, outdoors, backpacking, water skiing, juggling, I'm guessing that's good for the brain, home improvement, and raising backyard chickens. Wow. What a bio right there. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Stadtherr.
Certainly. Thank you, Jordan, for giving me the opportunity to meet with you.
And when I look at, your background in metabolic health and metabolism and obesity, boy, your timing is good. You have created job security.
I certainly think so. We're in trouble in this country.
I know. It's so bad. It's so very bad because, as I understand it, waistline is really everything, right? Visceral fat's really everything. And it's just waistline. Even my friends who are skinny, quote unquote skinny, they all have bellies. So maybe they're thin on the outside, but fat on the inside.
Right. Yeah. Another way of saying it is skinny fat.
Skinny fat.
Visceral. Yeah.
Why did you get into family medicine and particularly specializing in obesity?
Yeah, it took a long ways to get there. So initially, family medicine appealed to me because my vision of a doctor has always been the black bag doctor, the doctor who does everything. And rather than being super specialized, I just felt that the family medicine afforded me all sorts of opportunities. I could transition any direction I wanted to. And I really loved the full spectrum of family medicine and really enjoyed my relationships with my regular patients. So it kind of hurt me to cut off that family medicine career and lose the continuity with those patients. Although I've kind of reinstated that with my new clinic venture. But then I transitioned into hospital medicine because, at the time, physicians in family medicine were really becoming compartmentalized in terms of working strictly in the outpatient setting versus covering both outpatient and inpatient. It was just tedious to go to the hospital when you have a full clinic days, and the writing was on the wall. I knew it was coming, so I transitioned over to hospital medicine and have been doing that since 2009. Actually, still maintain a little bit of work on a locum basis, temporary shifts and so on. And it was during my hospital time, hospital medicine years, where I kind of realized that I found myself on the wrong side of healthcare. I was stuck in sick care, as you well know, and it's just frustrating. Day after day, we're kicking the proverbial can down the road. in terms of we're not making any substantial difference in people's health or longevity. We're just throwing some band-aids on them, getting them back on their feet, get them out the door, only to welcome them back another, a few weeks later, a few months later, whatever it is. So really, we were not moving the needle on people's health in conventional healthcare, and that became really frustrating. And it was clear to me that patients wanted better, and I started. Well, I had this big moment. My road to Damascus moment was when I encountered this patient with diabetes in the hospital. And I'm looking through the sugars, and they're terrible. 200s, 300s, pretty routinely. And of course, the hospital standard of care is, to stop their oral medications and slug them with insulin, and these sliding scales of insulin. So the higher their glucose, the more insulin they get. And I walked into this patient's room, and after looking at his terrible glucoses, and he had just finished breakfast, and on his tray is this plate that just housed a giant Belgian waffle with syrup, had a bowl of fruit, had a glass of orange juice, and something set me off at that moment. Just the craziness of that situation, and I stormed out of that room and called down to the cafeteria, a little bit angry, I'm sure. And so, what's going on here? My patient's supposed to be on a diabetic diet. What is this? They have a huge Belgian waffle. Oh, well, sir, they're on the diabetic diet. They're allowed 60 grams of carbohydrates per meal. I'm like, boggled my mind. Here I've been ordering this diabetic diet all the time, and it never stopped to think, well, what does it actually mean? And that's the way it is. I quiz doctors all the time now, especially the residents in training. Like, hey, you order this diet all the time. What does it mean? The physicians basically have no idea what the diets mean. They just trust that, oh, it says diabetic, that must be right. Or it says a cardiac diet. Oh, that's good for everyone, right? Heart healthy, ooh, which is far from the truth. And so that set off a fire in me, and I did all sorts of research on diet, diabetes, proper management, and so on. And that's where I dove into the research. So this is back in 2014, I believe. And at the time, there was very little research out there in terms of low carb. But that's what I fell into with Dr. Westman, Finney and Volek, discovering some of their work, and the rest is history for me. It just set me down on a path like, aha, this is the light bulb I needed. And so I started incorporating some of these principles with my patients in the hospital, and they were the patients were super thankful, and actually very frustrated at the health system for not sharing with them the fact that, hey, there's another way of doing this. You don't have to be a slave to the insulin. This diet, the standard dietary guidelines apply to all the dietitian advice in regards to diabetes management. And it's just the same garbage everywhere you look. It's very predictable. It very much follows the dietary guidelines. And so kind of over the past few years, over the next few years from that point, patients really responded well. And I thought, hey, how can I help these people once they leave the hospital? Because once they leave, I'm done. There's no patient-physician relationship anymore. And yet they're gonna go back to their regular docs and get the same terrible advice that they've always been getting, back on their same insulin regimens and so on. And so that's kind of where the idea of my clinic germinated, and then just finally took off a year and a half ago, and I decided, all right, this is the time. I got to do this. So took me a while to get here.
Well, I commend your bravery in swimming upstream, because I imagine in 2014, and I remember, back then, there was just not a lot of info around it. And I know as a doctor, you're under a lot of pressure. You have a lot of eyeballs on you to follow, standard operating procedure. And this is what you learned in school, and this is what you apply. And it's just shocking to me, as a layman, that is not offered, that when you can get people off insulin, and it's a proven model, that it's just not offered. And it's equally as shocking that you can reach the level of education that an MD has. I mean, I don't have to tell you the extensive amount of work, to get to the level you guys get to. It just brutal. And to not know about nutrition and just not know it. It's not like it's a, it's not like there's malintent there. It's just not an awareness, like it's just not a modality that's talked about. And it's shocking. I have so many, I know it's anecdotal, but I have so many friends and relatives who have turned things around using this protocol. And, it's sitting right there. It's a shame. It really is. It's,
I like what you said. I like what you said there. I shouldn't feel like I'm fighting upstream to do something that makes such a difference for patients. And yet, I'll tell you, I almost lost my job over my initiatives because I was pushing to restrict carbohydrates for patients in the hospital. I mean, it's basic science, right? And yet, the dietitians hated me. They wouldn't even look at me in the eye after all that. And I butted heads with administration. And it was just a terrible experience. But talk to my patients, they were so grateful to finally be told, hey, there's another way. I mean, medicine is so behind in terms of the science, I mean, it's amazing how long it takes some basic research to get to the front lines.
Yeah, that's really it. It's the funding of the research, right? Which is ultra expensive, which is kind of a, high cost of participation, which some people have said, hey, that's part of the design, right? You can price the average person out, and only really big pharma can play the game. They're the only ones who play the game and control the playing space. They own the field. It's hard to,
Right.
And when the opposition owns the field, and owns the referees.
Right. And part of the problem is the insurance-based model of healthcare very much dictates how much time your doctor spends with you. Right. So the average patient physician encounter face-to-face time is only 10.3 minutes, which is terrible. You can't accomplish anything in 10 minutes. So the doctor's rushed. They have a litany of checklist items to accomplish in order to properly bill you for the visit, because that's ultimately all that the administrators care about. Did you generate revenue from that visit? Who cares about the patient, the outcome, the whatever, all of that subjective stuff? We want to operate in the black.
Yeah,
and so
people forget it's a business. They think it's altruistic, but it's a business.
Right. So that's why your doctor's a slave to the computer. That's why their face is stuck in the computer, because they're having to document everything to properly bill for your visit.
Wow.
It's so a lot of it's driven by the
doctors leaving the field, right? Because it's like they're done. They're just going to start open their own practice and try to and do why they went to medical school in the first place: heal people.
Right.
What a concept.
It's driven by the government mandates on electronic medical records, electronic documentation, because it's easier to track data. But this is why I left the insurance-based model, and my practice is a direct care practice. So I can spend as much time with my patients as I want. My first visit with patients is 90 minutes. People are blown away. People keep telling me I don't charge enough. It's like, doc, you just spent 2 hours with me. You don't charge enough. I'm like, oh. that's my problem.
I wish you were in Florida. I don't know if they'd let you do. Yeah, they would. You're an MD. They would let you. Yeah, they don't let the NDs practice here, but they let the MDs.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
talk science, because I know a lot of people.
Yeah.
The real important element that I don't want to lose track is application, right? Implementation, because a lot of people who are listening already are somewhat familiar with the science and somewhat familiar with how effective it is. But it's the implementation. So why don't we touch upon sugar in general, processed foods, carbohydrates, and tell me if this is an accurate statement. Pretty much all ailments are starting to look like they're coming from blood sugar, like, diabetes, dementia, heart disease, cancer seem to have some sort of correlation with blood sugar and inflammation. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, I completely agree. I take a kind of a reductionist perspective on healthcare, medicine in general. And what I mean is I kind of step back and look at all these different entities, the common conditions that we're encountering. And, it's estimated probably about 80% of all the things that we're doing in healthcare are related to insulin resistance. So, and that's directly related to the glucose and processed foods effects on our bodies. And so, quite very simply, insulin resistance, your body uses insulin to direct where energy goes to protect against elevated glucose. And so you pummel yourself with carbs, break down the glucose. Your body uses insulin to shuttle that glucose somewhere else. It can't stay in the blood. It's causing harm everywhere. And so if, for people who are able, you sock that energy, sock excess energy away as fat. So high insulin and high glucose equals fat storage. One of the things I hammer home with my patients is, high insulin turns off fat burning. And so you have to realize that anytime you spike your insulin, you've just turned off fat burning. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Think about primitive time. Like, hey, you don't know when you're getting your next meal. You're running on your fat stores. All of a sudden, you come across this field of berries or potatoes or whatever, some source of carbs. The gatherers struck it rich, and you consume a bunch of these, drive up your glucose. Now you get this insulin spike. Well, your body's sending a signal saying, "Hey, stop burning the fat. We got to hold on to that for a critical period. Like we don't know when a famine's coming. Don't burn the fat right now. We got the sugar." And so, you hear this typical advice of eat several small meals a day, eat every couple hours. This is the notorious piece of advice from dietitians. But what you're doing is you're spiking your insulin every couple hours. You're never going to burn the fat because every time you spike it, boom, turns off fat burning. Or most people actually are maintaining a relatively high insulin level all the time. That's kind of the state of affairs in this country. Where their insulin levels are running high all the time, and so they never start, they never activate fat burning. They're always suppressing fat burning because of that high insulin level. All these chronic conditions, the ones you named, as well as cancers, inflammatory conditions, a whole myriad of them, are associated with high insulin levels. And so ultimately, I look at looking at the big picture, I look at decreasing your insulin as a primary goal of metabolic health.
And I heard one of the other big indicators that you are in this chronic insulin resistance state of affairs is when the visceral fat actually starts accumulating. Can you speak directly to visceral fat and why it's the more dangerous kind of fat compared to subcutaneous fat?
Yeah, visceral fat is definitely associated with all these major conditions as well. I don't know the exact mechanism for what makes visceral fat more damaging, more inflammatory, and so on. But what it appears that subcutaneous fat buffers against disease, whereas visceral fat contributes to disease. And so like I mentioned, the people who have high insulin levels are able to store well, if they're if they're good fat stores, they can store the excess energy as fat rather than that excess energy staying in circulation and causing the glucose to be high. So in a way, the fat is a buffer against diabetes. And this gets into this concept of personal fat threshold. You know, why do I have 700 to 800 pound patients in the hospital who have perfect blood work, not diabetic, their lipids look great, the A1C is perfect. And then I have, you know, somebody with a BMI of 25, 27, or you look at, you know, Asian populations now, where they've got the skinny fat issues, and diabetes is raging there. You know, where this skinny person with diabetes type 2, and yet sumo wrestler, the 800 pound patient, they don't have any disruption in their glucose tolerance, and it's because they're very efficient fat storers. They can sock away all that energy as fat, and it takes it out of circulation.
So are you saying that the sumo wrestlers are able to store that fat as sub-Q fat and therefore not dangerous visceral fat?
Yeah, more so than the average bear. They can pack on a lot of that subcutaneous fat. Now, they probably have visceral fat, certainly. And a lot of these, you know, there's this concept of metabolically healthy obese. So people who are obese with normal metabolic markers. So their glucose looks fine, their A1C looks fine, and heck, even their fasting insulin looks fine sometimes. So they're considered metabolically healthy, even though they don't have the phenotype to match it. So their outward appearance doesn't look metabolically healthy. Problem is, that probably catches up to them eventually. So years down the road, things are going to change. That's not going to stay the case. But yeah, there's just this different threshold for how much fat can your body store before you develop diabetes. So your body can only do so much to buffer against diabetes by storing fat until it hits your threshold, and that's probably determined a lot by genetics. You see the Asian populations, like I referenced, they get diabetes at a very low BMI relative to a lot of Americans. And also regarding the visceral fat issue, the visceral fat is surrounding the organs, so it's enmeshed in the central organs, and one place we commonly see it is the liver. So you see fatty liver disease. And you may hear NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's just another symptom of insulin resistance, just like obesity, just like diabetes, just another symptom, just another manifestation. Of course, we treat it like a totally different entity, which doesn't make sense because it's all really the same disease, as I was talking about earlier. So 80% of all this stuff it's the same disease. But with the fatty liver infiltration, we know that fat in the liver drives insulin resistance, and has a particular propensity to do so, and that's one mechanism by which visceral fat can worsen the insulin resistance. So even a skinny person can have a fatty liver, and that'll drive insulin resistance. And some people, some scientists, physicians, etc., basically equate the liver health with metabolic health, that it's that important to our overall metabolic health.
It's almost like after a lifetime of abuse, the organ just says, I'm done cleaning up your mess. You've got to, you can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Quit pummeling me with those simple sugars.
Yeah.
You can only do so much with them.
I want to go to my own stuff, but I want to visit the important ways of handling this, and why you feel that this is the best way forward. You've been a vocal proponent of the low carb nutritional lifestyle. There's ways to do that. Are you a hardcore carnivore where you're not doing any veggies or any fruit at all? Or are you more of a moderation Mediterranean type of practitioner? Where do you fall on the spectrum? Because you know there's a wide spectrum out there.
For sure. I go through phases. For the most part, I am 90+% carnivore. Or you know, a lot of people call it animal based. So I do very meat heavy, predominantly beef. That's 95% of the time it's beef. A little bit of chicken, a little bit of pork, a little bit of miscellaneous, you know, ham, etc. But I incorporate dairy. I tolerate dairy very well. Grew up in Minnesota.
That's the law. It's the law. You guys have to sign a contract. Yeah,
that's right.
cheese and dairy and yeah. Although cheese is a little more Wisconsin than, but yeah.
Fair. And so I tolerate dairy very well. I keep that in my diet. So a lot of sour cream, cheese, even some milk. I really backed away from milk, but now that I have young kids that were drinking milk, I'm like, can't resist it. But no sign of lactose intolerance, so that's good. I do. So basically, I would eat strictly animal based if it weren't for having young children. So 4 and 5 year old, and so obviously we let them be kids as well. They're not a strict low carb diet, but minimizing processed foods. So I really don't dig into processed foods at all. That's an exception. But yeah, so 90+% carnivore plus dairy plus eggs.
Which, when you hear that, it's the polar opposite of what we have been told since Ansel Keys and H.R. Kellogg worked the system to their benefit and made it all grains, and it's still psychologically, I speak for me because I've been trying on and off. I the last couple of years trying on and off keto, which is really hard for me, and trying for the last 2 months on and off on the carnivore. I've definitely had all of the positive stuff doing the carnivore, the clear-headed, body aches gone, popping out of bed early, not feeling tired at all, feeling just clear-headed, feeling flexible, like when I was 12 and like you can move in any direction. You feel like Gumby and nothing hurts. So those are all amazing positives. For me, one of the areas that two big challenges, I don't know if anyone else is facing this, but one is late at night wanting some carbs, wanting something sweet, cold. I like to freeze my fruit, freeze bananas and blueberries, and I'll even spray lemon juice on them. Because then when I notice when I take the peels off the bananas, I'll spray the bananas with lemon juice so they don't brown for that first 2 hours that they're trying to freeze. And then it's a nice sweet sour play, which is nice, but it's an addiction. Even when I tell myself I don't want to do it, I will find myself eating that cold, sweet, late at night, and breaking that carnivore type of protocol or breaking a fast. So that's kind of like challenge number one. And then challenge number two, you always hear people who are in carnivore, you're going to lose weight, dude. It's great. You're going to lose weight. And they're kind of like saying, I promise you lose weight. And I'm like, for some of us, that's not a positive. Like not all of us want to lose weight. I want to maintain my lean body mass. If anything, I want to grow it. I want to get bigger and stronger. I don't want to feel tired in the gym. And I noticed that's like the 800-pound gorilla in the room, if you will, is bonking in the gym on carnivore. And they keep acting like you're going to be great. It's meat. You're going to be strong. No, man, I get flat. I get flat on carnivore. I'm flat in the gym and I'm losing size. And it seems counterproductive because strength is health. So it's confusing for us. We're confused. Can you speak to the positives are there? That like the testimonials, thousands of testimonials. Jordan Peterson just on Rogan. I don't know if you saw that. he just did a whole soliloquy. I have it on my notes somewhere here. I'll say all the stuff it fixed for him, like 10 things.
Yeah.
Those are all there. They're real. I know they're anecdotal, but when you get to 10,000 people all saying the same thing, it starts becoming kind of obvious. So the benefits, but what about the negatives? What about fiber? What about phytonutrients?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff out there. What about bright colors? Bright colors to fight cancer. All of the reds and purples and greens in my fruit and veggies. Sorry, I'm hitting you with a lot of stuff, doctor. I just
no worries.
Frustrated in Seattle. I'm signing this note. Frustrated in Seattle.
Oh boy. All right. Let's start with the nighttime sugar cravings. I was a sugar junkie. I mean, as a kid, I grew up on Kool-Aid, lemonade, frosting. I mean, heck, we used to sneak frosting out of the fridge and scoop it out by the finger. And God, man, I was a sugar addict. Lived on regular soda. I was never a coffee person. I survived med school with Mountain Dew. That was my crutch.
Wow.
College, med school, residency. I was a Mountain Dew junkie.
Wow.
Yeah. And I can tell you the day I quit it, and I still have. I still have in my cabinet to tell you how meaningful this was. And I label it what would have been the next can.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I cut it off cold turkey and have that trophy.
Wow.
So yeah.
That really speaks to how much of a moment that was for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's so bad. I went to Haiti for 3.5 weeks when I was in med school, and I was like, "What am I going to do? They don't have Mountain Dew in Haiti, do they?" I'm not going to be able to go to the local supermarket and pick up my Mountain Dew, and so I packed it. I packed a case of Mountain Dew.
Packed Mountain Dew. Wow.
It's terrible. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So just to give you an idea, I beat it. I beat the sugar cravings. And the first few weeks are difficult. Can't lie. But what got me through it was having some healthy go-tos. So like, all right, if I have a craving, I'm not going to reach for the sugar. I'm going to have the nuts, the cheese, something else, the beef jerky, whatever. It doesn't have to be perfect food, but it was something to get me through that phase. I'm going to drink a ton of water, bunch of ice water, whatever it takes to satisfy my or quench my thirst. Because that's one thing is, speaking of cravings, is sometimes thirst is misinterpreted as hunger, and so number one is address the potential thirst. So drink a glass of water or two, and then sit with where you are. Stop and sit and feel. Am I really hungry? Do I really need the sugar? Am I really going to give into this craving? And how am I going to feel about it when I do? And you start analyzing, like, all right, here are the reasons why I know I should not indulge in this craving. Here's the potential consequences. And so just creating this mental list of pluses, minuses, and kind of, grasping the gravity of this decision day in and day out. If I keep indulging in this craving, what's going to happen? Things I don't want. Your health is going to go down the toilet. And so, that's kind of a strategy that helped me through a lot of it. And even just like if you're getting cravings at night, make sure you're eating enough at dinner or in the afternoon, whatever, so you're not getting that hunger in the evening. It's like, hey, I just ate my fill. I don't need to reach for another food item, another snack, because I ate my fill. It's kind of like this idea of novelty in our diets. Picture Thanksgiving dinner. you eat your fill, right? You get your turkey, your potatoes, your whatever. And at the end of your meal, you're like, oh man, can't eat another bite. Good dinner, Mom. 5 minutes later, Mom comes out with the pumpkin pie. Who wants pumpkin pie? Oh. Right? Now you have room for it. and that's because our brains are wired to love and crave the treats. But there's no way you could put another bite of turkey down your throat. But hey, open up for some pumpkin pie or ice cream or whatever it is. So that novelty is a problem. And this is how, look at buffet lines too. You gorge on all this stuff and then, oh, there's the desserts and look at all the options I have. Irresistible to our primitive brains. So using some discipline, don't have the snacks in your house, number one. If they're not there, make it, it's too hard to get to them. You're not going to reach for them. And then, those other strategies I mentioned, drinking water and making sure you're filled to satiety, etc. So that's kind of my thought on nighttime sugar cravings. The next thing you mentioned, you don't want to lose weight. So carnivore is excellent for weight loss. Drives your glucose down, drives your insulin down, finally allows your fat burning to occur. One strategy is just increasing fat intake. Borders on the whole keto diet. Speaking of, I hate the word keto. It just sounds like a fad diet. And there's nothing fad about ketogenic diets. It's in our ancestors for millennia. Ate a diet that would be considered ketogenic, but now we call it keto, and everybody's chasing their ketones and drinking their fat bombs every morning. It's turned into something just cultish. So I really hate the term, but it is what it is. People know what you mean when you say it. But yeah, I think increasing fat intake is just one easy strategy to avoid losing too much weight. Ideally with weight training and enough proteins, you're going to put on some muscle mass. But yeah, it's very easy to find yourself losing weight on a strict carnivore diet. So that can be tricky. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, one of the kind of fallbacks that I've used for that exact trickiness that you're referencing, because it is very tricky. Even when I'm upping my protein, I'm an ectomorph. You go to Wikipedia and you look up ectomorph, you'll see my picture there. I burn calories. So it's super tricky. So I've been pulsing the last 2 weeks. I've been pulsing my carbs. So I'll do a nice 2 days of clean carnivore. And I'll start getting those nice benefits. And then when I start feeling that, it's a weird feeling. It's hard to describe. It's like, part of it, I guess the word's detox, right? You get a little sweaty, a little bit nauseous. I almost feel catabolic. I almost feel like my body this is the psychological one for me to get over. I feel like my body is cannibalizing my lean body mass. And I don't know if that's just the detox, and maybe that's just a misread on my part, but it really feels like I'm getting weak. And instead of eating fat or sugar or glycogen or anything, it's eating my muscle. Could there be any accuracy to that? Could it be a catabolic, at least during the transition? When does it not become catabolic if it is?
Yeah, it shouldn't be a problem if you're consuming enough energy with proteins, fats, etc. Your body shouldn't be sacrificing muscle. That's just contrary to your body's goal. So hard to say what's happening there exactly. Especially with doing some weight training and reinforcing the need to maintain that muscle, because muscle it's very expensive to maintain. You know, your body will sacrifice it if needed. But if you're sending a consistent signal, hey, you're important. Oh, and by the way, you failed me today in the gym. You better get stronger for tomorrow. Consistently sending those messages to your muscles. You shouldn't be breaking them down.
That's good to know. That's really good to know. So it's probably more psychological. And I heard something along those lines that I really stuck with me. Someone told me to work my legs more. Classic American thing, working upper body and not working your legs enough. They said, work, the big muscle groups, the quads, the glutes. And that's literally telling your body, oh, you still need to catch deer. All right, here's some more growth hormone. Here's some more anti-aging hormones. And I also, along those lines, I also heard that there are correlations between body mass index, lean body mass to fat ratio, and survivability in the hospital. When I heard that, I'm like, wow, I can't believe they've done those types of studies.
Oh yeah.
And B, it's fascinating. The more muscle you have, you've increased your odds of walking out of that hospital alive. That's wild.
Yeah, I came across one of those studies. I did a presentation on immune health in the COVID times. But muscle mass was critical, as well as strength in terms of survival.
Because you can have these strong dudes, right, who aren't necessarily big. They might not be big muscle mass guys, but they're climbers, right? You're on the Pacific Northwest. They're climbers. They're gymnasts, and they weigh 148 pounds, and they are strong, as a gorilla. And is that because of lean body, no marbling, lean body mass density? Because I know a lot of puffy guys who come into the gym, they weigh 260 and they're puffy and thick, and they bench 225. They put 245s on each side, and they're slamming the weight like, hey, everybody look at me, and they're grunting and groaning, but they weigh 265. So they're not even doing a push-up. The weight's 225, right? You don't get to scream. I don't care that it's 225. You weigh 265. You don't get to scream when you're slamming those weights. You're not even doing a push-up.
Yeah, this goes into that whole never-ending debate about how many reps is ideal for hypertrophy or strength or whatever. What are your goals? It's like you look at some bodybuilders, and granted, they're strong, right? But not as strong as you'd expect for their mass. And it's just the way they've trained. They're pushing the hypertrophy algorithm, whereas
rather than the strength algorithm.
Whereas the rock climber is just going for brute strength, and it behooves them to stay small. So they're not pushing the 12 to 15 rep ranges to get that pump.
We're getting some people writing in here, doctor. I want to visit vitamin K2. I want to visit coronary artery calcium in HDL, LDL. We'll visit that in a bit, but let's get to some of these people in case they need to scoot. Brian from Tampa writes in, do you mean to tell me that for hundreds of thousands of years across almost every part of the globe, humans have been getting it wrong by eating vegetables? All right, there you go, Doc. There's your first one. A shot across the bow. Sorry that it was on that angle. I'll find a good one. There's plenty of good ones too.
Yeah, so vegetables. One thing to keep in mind is vegetables have changed an incredible amount over the last thousands of years, whatever the timeline. I saw one schematic of, look at all these different vegetables that derived from the mustard plant. Basically no fruit, no vegetable, whatever, or no actual edible part to it. And then we've got broccoli, we've got cauliflower, we've got all these other vegetables that derived from the same plant. But it's the same thing with fruits. That they've been genetically modified over time, preferentially farmed to create giant fruit, sweeter and bigger fruits. I mean, bananas used to be just a couple inches. Now they're 6-inch carb bombs. There's 30 to 40 grams of carbs per banana. Everybody thinks they're so healthy, but man,
and I eat so many of them. Oh, that's
right,
such.
right.
Oh my gosh, I'm so bad. Anyway, sorry, I didn't interrupt. Keep
Yeah,
going.
no, it's all good. So I don't think vegetables are necessarily bad. I don't think carnivore is right for everyone. A strict carnivore diet is the right thing for everyone. You do what you can tolerate. I look at carnivore as a valuable tool. It's one of the many tools at my disposal. If you're trying to achieve insulin sensitivity, reverse diabetes, lose weight, that's a great tool. Do you have to avoid vegetables? No, not at all. You can do the 90% carb, the 90% carnivore, 80% carnivore, however you want to do it. There's no rules. We get hung up on all these tribes that preach, you have to be strict carnivore to be part of our group. Don't you dare ask a question involving coffee or vegetables. Come on. Do what your body tolerates. Do what works. Pay attention to your body. Listen to feedback from how your body tolerates these things. I think that's where what people should be focused on, not being part of the strict tribe.
Well said, doctor. Well said. Anonymous writes in from Lando Lakes. Can the doctor explain why there are other doctors who discuss the exact same bodily functions and processing of foods and nutrients, but come to what is seemingly the exact opposite conclusion as far as which foods are beneficial and which foods are harmful, and how the body processes the different food types and nutrients? Why is there so much room for different interpretations? Shouldn't this be mechanically understood and documented and generally standard as far as how the human body processes each type of food and nutrient type? Sounds like an engineer, but I'll tell you what,
For sure.
I'm with this person, because you see, like you got a whole group of doctors, prestigious as all get out, all MDs, talking about how important it is to eat meat only. And then you get a whole group of doctors, prestigious as all get out, all MDs. These were all heavy hitters on both sides, saying, stay away from red meat. If there's one food you avoid, it's red meat. How could there be such polar opposition?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And I'll tell you, I was trained in a very conventional allopathic medical school with the standard 2.5 hours of nutrition lectures. And by the way, we chose to skip when we were looking for a skip day to go hit the slopes. It was the nutrition day that we skipped because it was so predictable.
Oh my gosh! Oh, that's too funny.
It was so predictable. We saw the notes. We knew it was like, it's the dietary guidelines. Saturated fat's bad and fiber's good, and here's why you eat your fruits and veggies. Come on, I don't need to sit through that. I've heard that a million times already. It's just so predictable. It was painful. It's just like dietitians these days. If they're in the system, they must preach the dietary guidelines. They have no wiggle room. So the only dietitians that stray from that are the ones that have gone rogue. When it comes to doctors, I was the conventional trained doc, and for a while I believed all that I was taught. Right? I mean, I just spent 6 figures on an education. This has to be state of the art, modern, the best of the best. Right? I just went into depth for all of this. It has to be good information. I spent my 20s in libraries and my head in a book. Of course, this information is accurate. And then I had some mini epiphanies along the way, and started, even before 2014 or whatever it was when I had my that moment in the hospital. I kind of learned about low carb and how bodybuilders use diets to cut fat, and and started incorporating some of those things. And the science is there. The problem is the pressures from the establishment of healthcare make it so difficult for a physician to stray anywhere away from the mainstream approach. So you risk being called out by your peers. You risk being subject to potentially liability malpractice issues because it's not the quote unquote standard of care. To tell somebody to go carnivore when they have coronary artery disease, you'll never find a cardiologist that's, well, there's a couple, I guess, but chances are you're not going to find a cardiologist to say, oh yeah, that's okay. That's a standard of care. Well, no, it's not. And so when you breach the standard of care in healthcare, and there's a bad outcome, you're subject to litigation. And so unless a physician is really well read and confident on a particular dietary approach that's not mainstream, they're not going to bother, and they don't have the time. Again, the pressures in healthcare too make it such that primary doctors and specialists all alike, they don't have the time to chase down these issues. You really have to make a dedicated effort to read on your own, do the research on your own, because no one's going to help you with it. Part of the problem too is how you interpret studies. So for one, a lot of the studies that trash meat, that the vegan, the vegetarian side uses to support their claims, are epidemiological studies. As everyone knows from 8th grade science, correlation does not imply causation. Yet we're still hung up on this. And a lot of them use food frequency questionnaires, for one. I don't know if you're familiar with those. They basically ask you to write, check a box. How frequently did you eat processed meats? How frequently in the last 6 months did you eat bacon? And so on, through all sorts of ingredients. Well, come on. How can you possibly distill down on paper what your diet has looked like for the last 3 months, 6 months, whatever? Most people don't know what they ate 2 days ago, let alone last week or beyond. So anytime I see a study with food frequency questionnaires, I'm not reading it with an open mind in terms of like, oh, this might be a useful piece of data. No, it's a garbage study. That's not reliable data. So garbage in, garbage out. Nutrition research suffers from some major issues in terms of randomization, implementing interventional trials, controlling what the subjects do. If you want to get a solid nutritional study done, you got to do a metabolic ward. You got to put them in a facility and monitor every calorie that goes in them, monitor their activity, make sure they're not indulging behind your back. That's where you get quality data. It's basically inhumane unless you have some volunteers for that. But those studies just aren't done. And the problem is we'll probably never get the highest quality studies that we really desire in the nutrition world, because they're just not possible. And so largely it's, how do physicians look at research? How critical are they reviewing it? Some of my colleagues may look at that study that has a food frequency questionnaire and, oh, this is correlated with that. Oh gosh, that could be, they suddenly turn it into a cause effect interpretation. Whereas I look at it and say, garbage. Next study. I'm not looking at it. It's a food frequency questionnaire. I don't put any stock in those. If that's what you use to put your study together, it's a low quality study. And that's where the big that's where all these studies come attacking red meat. But when you do And there are a couple randomized controlled trials. When you look at, fat intake, for example, high fat versus high carb, you do not see harm for fat. Some of those things disappear when you do a quality study.
I think for just about everybody that they should do their own testing, right? Like, given the fact that there's some shaky studies out there and some questionable incentives and questionable intentions, there's not a lot of money that could be made in teaching people how to eat right. If anything, you can lose money that way. They're not buying the expensive pills anymore. And frankly, you're helping them get out of the hospital 3 days earlier. So there's, I hate to be someone who, questions someone's motives, but, there's a lot of incentive, financial incentive for keeping things the way they are. And so you almost have to do your own testing. If people can get to the point, and it's just eating, right? Changing your eating and seeing, like, I did enough carnivore and felt the difference to know, okay, boom, all of these anecdotal stories I'm hearing from hundreds. I mean, again, let me see if I can pull up the Jordan Peterson, because his were even more impressive than mine. Let's see if I can find them. Yeah, so Jordan Peterson was suffering from depression, snoring, gum disease, gastric reflux disorder, psoriasis, had bad mood regulation, eye floaters, bad appetite, blood dysregulation. So he said when he went carnivore, and he does not cheat, he's 100% carnivore, does not cheat, all of those things fixed. No anxiety, no depression, all gone. No psoriasis went away. Leg numbness went away. His weight went from 212 to 162. And, for him, he loves it. He said, he can see his stomach muscles now and all good things. I felt probably 60% of that. The good mood, alertness, popping out of bed, just not needing as much sleep, feeling good, feeling highly competent, feeling flexible. All those things are, now I know, like, what you guys are saying, at least the benefits are there, right? Like, who knows long-term? I don't know if there's any long-term studies done, but I'm, people can believe me or not believe me. It's anecdotal, I know, but I'm telling you, this is what it fixed. That period. Yeah. That's what it fixed for me. And there's thousands of people, like, the low carb movement's huge, and people are like passionate about this because it saves their lives. So that's kind of, I hope that in some ways that answers our person from Land O'Lakes wondering how there could be two such polar. What is it though about the vegetarian stuff that works? I heard, hey, they are getting off processed foods. They're getting off Mountain Dew, right? They're getting off Mountain Dew. They're going to have some benefits, but that those benefits aren't necessarily related to not eating meat, not eating animals. Yes.
Yeah. I even acknowledge, especially when I'm talking to patients in the hospital with diabetes, I'll explain to them, hey, here's what's going on with carbohydrates. Here's why they're bad in the setting of insulin resistance, diabetes, whatever it is. I'll tell them, hey, there's two approaches to this. One, you can go extremely low fat, i.e. plant-based, whole food diet, whatever you want to call it, vegan, vegetarian, etc. You can go incredibly low fat, or you can go high fat, low carb. Okay, so there's kind of the polar opposites. And in regards to protein, people in general, and this has been supported by studies, if you tell them to eat low protein, high protein, they all kind of come back towards roughly 20, 25%, whatever, somewhere in there. So protein remains relatively constant in the long run. There can be short-term changes, but it comes back. So it's really just, you're moving the lever on fat or carbs. So either one of those approaches can be beneficial, and what you're doing is you're you're just decreasing the amount of energy you're putting into the body. And so you can look at carbs and fat as just an energy source. Fat being much more dense, 9 calories per gram versus carbs, 4 calories per gram. So you can reverse diabetes with a very low fat diet, which ends up being relatively high carb. Couple problems. And again, that's just because you're decreasing the energy intake into your body. So hopefully you're eating a lot of, non-starchy vegetables. That's certainly an important part of that. But some problems with that. Number one, not very sustainable. Nobody ever opts for that option when I talk to them about it. Like, no way, doc, sounds terrible. Can't do it. And number two, there's an issue of nutrient deficiencies. So are you getting your micronutrients? Most commonly known deficiency with a plant-based diet is a B12 deficiency, but there's others. And then there's the issue of bioavailability. When you consume these plant foods, how much of the nutrients are being absorbed? Are you familiar with the famous zinc study?
No.
Oysters?
No.
Oh man. So there's this study with oysters. So there's 3 groups. One, a group ate oysters alone. Oh, and all of the zinc was radio labeled in this, so they could track how much was absorbed. So one group was oysters alone. Another group was oysters with beans. And the third group was oysters with corn tortillas. So by far the best absorption was with the group that ate oysters by themselves. And less than half of the zinc was absorbed in people who ate the oysters with beans. And virtually none of the zinc was absorbed when they ate the same amount of oysters, mind you, with corn tortillas.
Wow.
Yeah. So speaking to the power of anti-nutrients, phytates, these things that are binding nutrients in plants. So consuming a nutrient-dense food could be sabotaged by what you're eating it with. It's a really cool study. It's one of those things that convinced me, like, hey, what's so bad about carnivore? It's the most bioavailable nutrients, and so that's one big issue with doing a plant-based diet of vegan, vegetarian, etc.
Are there any vitamins or minerals that are missing if you're just eating meat? You hear about all of the vitamin-packed nutrition in vegetables and fruits, especially you hear a lot about the phytonutrients, the colors that plants and fruits develop to protect themselves from radiation. And then you get to kind of hijack all that protection. Are you missing any of that when you eat only the meat?
The big criticism has been vitamin C that's not prevalent in meat. But let's clarify that. It's not present in muscle meat. But there's actually quite a bit of vitamin C in beef liver, for example. You can get it. And it is present in a trace amount in muscle meat. It's just not significant amounts. But one of the issues with, people fear like, oh, well, if you're eating carnivore, you're not getting vitamin C, you're going to develop scurvy, etc. Well, there's an interesting issue at hand here, which is that the vitamin C molecule looks almost identical to the glucose molecule. And so there's a lot of, it's believed that there's a lot of confusion in your body about processing vitamin C when there's a lot of glucose present. And so you may need a higher amount of vitamin C when you're eating a carb-heavy diet. When you're very low on carbs, however, you can get by with a much lower amount of vitamin C because there's less of that confusion about metabolizing the right molecule. Because again, they're nearly identical. So there's some confusion in processing. So vitamin C has not been identified. Vitamin C deficiency has not been identified as an issue among long-term carnivores. None of them are developing scurvy. and even ones that don't consume organ meats like liver. It just doesn't pan out. The other nutrient of concern, fiber. There's so much to say about fiber. There's really not any great evidence that says fiber is important, that it's critical. And in fact, there was a study of people with chronic lower GI complaints, so pain, bleeding, incomplete emptying, all these lower GI complaints, and they made them all go to a zero fiber diet, and then after a period of time, they said, all right, you can introduce fiber again up to a level of comfort. And so it was kind of distributed. There were some that went to high fiber, some that went to low fiber, and actually most of them stayed at zero fiber because they were doing so great. And they reanalyzed, well, how are your symptoms? And the group that went zero fiber had complete resolution of all their lower GI complaints. Just incredible. But we keep teaching that fiber is so critical. We say fiber is so critical for passage of stools. Well, why? You're just creating more material to be passed. When I eat strict carnivore, I'm just fine. I pass stools regularly, not an issue. We say that fiber is critical for diverticulosis. Never been proven. It doesn't decrease diverticulosis. So the story on fiber is really not based on any quality science. Those are the big nutrients that keep getting brought up as issues with carnivore.
The other big one on red meat is colon issues, colon cancer, intestinal issues, in that because coming back to the fiber, because there's no fiber, there's nothing to push it through. So it sits in the same space and putrefies. And I guess that they're saying that the fat ferments in a way that creates purine and different types of poisons. And that's what they're thinking might increase the risk of colon cancer. Can you address that?
Yeah, I don't think that's accurate. The whole fermentation in the gut and poor motility, that's garbage. It just doesn't happen. Things are always moving. Your gut is, the gut is considered the third nervous system behind central and peripheral. Then you have the gut. It is so intricately controlled. It's not going to let anything just sit stagnant in there, unless you've damaged it with diabetes, causing a gastroparesis, which is basically paralysis of the gut. So I don't buy that argument. There are several studies looking at fiber supplementation and fruits, grains, whatever, as far as its effect on polyps, and even they did a few for a couple, 3-4 years, whatever it was, and they showed no benefit in fiber or fruit in reducing polyps. And then they're like, oh, well, maybe it wasn't done long enough. So then they do a study for 8 years, same deal. They couldn't find any difference. These are published in the New England Journal, big peer-reviewed journal. And so, we have research showing that fiber doesn't reduce polyps. Some of the, there's a lot of different ways to interpret research, as we were talking about. A lot of these correlational studies, and we just haven't demonstrated that fiber makes a big difference. But we need to focus on the things that do. What about smoking? That increases polyps. Obesity, that increases polyps. Alcohol, that increases polyps. Insulin resistance, visceral fat, etc. All of those things are contributing to polyps and cancer, colon cancers. Why are we so fixated on fiber? How about we address the insulin resistance that affects 93% of the country who are identified as having poor cardiometabolic health? That's where we should be focusing our efforts. Quit looking at fiber. That's just not it's not the way to look, not the place to look.
Heather from Columbus, Indiana writes in and says, I have a 3-part question. I'm wondering how long it takes to transition over, specifically our digestion. So that's one. I guess she's looking to adapt. Number 2, how to convince others that not eliminating daily is just fine. And number 3, what amount of daily water is the target?
Mm.
I should have given those to you one at a time.
Oh, that's okay.
All right.
First one, how long to transition, especially in terms of digestion? Quite variable. A lot of people, when they make a transition from the standard American diet or whatever into a carnivore diet, they'll experience diarrhea. And it has to do with the microbiome and your gut bugs getting used to the change in nutrients. So you're not giving them the usual food source, the starches, the sugars, etc. So there's a little catch-up time. That typically a few weeks. Hard to know exactly. I think that there's a lot of individual variation there. When I did when I launched into carnivore, I did a 30-day strict beef and water only diet. Beef, salt, and water. That is all I ate for 30 days, and felt amazing. And I had already been eating a very low carb ketogenic diet prior to that, and so I did not experience the diarrhea that is so common for people who launch into the carnivore diet from other diets. What happened to me though is I went my first 7 days, 0 stool, nothing at all. And that's because I was eating quality meat, quality nutrition. It was all being absorbed. My body savored every bit of that beef. Things weren't going to waste like they do with the high fiber diet. So there's nothing to pass. Well, then after 7 days, I had stools. And, at first it was like every other day, and then, or every 2 to 3 days, whatever it was. And then now it's kind of just settled up. So like daily, or it's every 1 to 2 days. And basically what you're getting then is sloughage of the intestinal cells, which occurs all the time. And so it's not actual food material. It's really just the lining of the intestine that's being continually refreshed, sloughed, and replaced. So that's where that comes from. But I adapted pretty quick. But again, I had a little head start with the very low carb diet. The second question: how do you appease others about not having the daily stools? Who said a daily stool is necessary? Who said it's healthy? Again, it depends what you're eating. I don't think it makes sense to put a whole bunch of bulk in your intestine just to have a stool. If you look at, I kind of go through this thought experiment of if you were to create the absolute perfect food, or the perfect nutritional situation, would you really include waste as part of that? I mean, why do you want waste? I don't know. It seems like taking the time to take a dump puts you at risk in a primitive setting. You have to stop.
Evolutionarily, you're in a vulnerable position.
Exactly. Stop and squat. No, you're better off if you just absorb your entire meal and you keep moving. I don't know.
Get back in the tree.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't see a problem with it. I think that's a human convention, a modern convention of, it's healthy to have a stool every day. I don't buy it. And then how much water to drink daily? I don't think there's a set amount. I think that's, the whole 8 cups a day is just really arbitrary. I think the best measure is to take a look at the color of your urine. Is it mostly clear, or is it prominently yellow? If it's yellow, drink more. I think that's the best rule of thumb, because there's so many factors. Insensible losses, the sweating and metabolism, and you're just not aware of all the ways that you lose water from your body. Even breathing, a lot of fluid comes out, humidity of your breath. So you just can't. It's too hard to set up a rule of thumb. So just keep an eye on the color of your urine. Bottom line.
Thank you for that question, Heather. Hey, when you did your beef, salt, and water only for a month and you were hyper strict, first, it really came through the way you said, I felt great. Like I could hear that in your voice, right? That's what you always hear from people. Like you just hear the emotion and the passion more than anything, because like it's such a good feeling to feel good in your body and for everything to be working. You're grateful. Like that's what, when I do have those feelings, that's my gratitude really, really comes forward. How much weight did you lose, and what percentage of the weight was fat versus lean body mass?
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have a good way to monitor that now. I now have a body composition scale in my office. I wish I had that back then. I had already been very low carb and, like I said, ketogenic for a while. So I had already lost the excess weight. Not that I didn't have any more to lose, but it wasn't a dramatic weight loss. I probably, over the 30 days, I probably lost another, I don't know, 8 to 10 pounds, let's say.
Are you ectomorph, endomorph, or mesomorph?
Let's see.
You look like a big dude. You look like you're an easy gainer. And I mean that in terms of both of just size in general. I don't mean fat. I mean, you just look like a big, you're a good Northwesterner, or actually you're Minnesota, which is even, you're a Viking. You're a Viking. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. I think that's fair. I'm able to put on weight pretty easily.
Yeah. And sorry for the personal question, but that, I think it's important in trying to decipher what different people are going to go through when they go on the carnivore, especially if they go strict. Here's another question. Jordan Peterson went from 212 to 162. He's 6'2". When does the slide stop? Because 162 in my mind, if he goes to 152, that's not going to look good at 6'2". And I know we're talking, this is superficial and it's ego based, but it's still a factor.
Yeah. I think it comes down to the fat intake again. That's your energy source. So that's going to dictate what happens. Are you familiar with Ted Naiman?
Sounds really familiar.
Yeah. So
is he the Scottish guy who was 600 pounds?
No. Ted Naiman's a physician out here, not too far from me, actually. He wrote a book about the PE diet, the PE ratio, the protein energy ratio. And basically he simplifies it down to, hey, there's protein, you need your protein, and the rest is just energy. Fat, carbs, it's all just energy. And again, there's a difference in density, nutritional density, and nutrients, but you get what you need from the protein, and the rest is just energy.
Wow.
And so he pushes this. It ultimately becomes a low fat, high fiber, and moderate protein diet, essentially. But I love the concept for defining, like, fat is an energy source, carbs are an energy source. It just simplifies that notion. So it's just,
it helps you thinking.
Yeah. So I really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, I like that. I enjoy that too. That's helpful. Yeah. What's his name again?
Ted Naiman, Naiman.
And what's the book?
The PE diet.
The PE diet. Okay, in case people are curious.
It's like P:E. So the PE ratio.
Here's another thing to think about, the microbiome. Aren't you supposed to eat a bunch of starch and inulin and fiber to feed the good guys? And don't you want good guys in your gut?
Yeah, right.
Oh man. I thought these were all givens, and the way you reacted to that is just sort of like, wow, my zip code is just wrong on this. I can't.
So first off, let's call it what it is. The microbiome is a big black box. We're not even close to understanding it. We know there's a lot of really important aspects to it. You may have heard of these studies. They transplant stool from a schizophrenic human into a normal mouse, and it starts developing schizophrenic behaviors. Wild. They transplant stool from an obese mouse into a normal, healthy mouse, or rats, whatever it was, rodent, becomes obese. There's something there, obviously. The microbiome matters, but we don't fully understand it. And there's some research that helps us with it. One of the things I came across is that there's a study that showed that going from a high carb diet to a carnivore diet does not decrease the alpha diversity of the microbiome, which is basically the variety of species. So they're still there. The same species are there, just in different concentrations. So you down-regulate. So when you cut out the carbs, you down-regulate the carb burners, and you upregulate the protein burners, the fat burners, etc. The metabolizers, however you say it. And so we don't actually know. We don't actually have any evidence that going carnivore reduces the diversity of your microbiome. There's certain bacteria families that are present in obesity, like the firmicutes, relative to Bacteroides in healthier normal weight individuals. Just an association, but there is some importance of the species and so on. People act like cutting out fiber is going to starve all your bugs, but we just haven't seen proof of that. It just doesn't seem to be the case.
So the diversity is still there. It's just the concentration, just the numbers. So they could theoretically, if someone freaked out, they could just go back and then revitalize them. They're still there. They could just repopulate them.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for throwing in revitalize. That's the name of my
Say again?
My clinic is Revitalize Metabolic Health.
Revitalize.
Yeah.
Hey, I should have said that a long time ago, so people could track you as we're talking. For people who want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, so I'm on the web at revitalizemetabolichealth.com. Also on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, etc.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
All right, getting close to wrapping here. I want to
sure.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say also with the microbiome, a change in the gut bugs is not necessarily bad. We don't know. We don't know what normal is. We don't have a manual for our bodies, right? We're just guessing. It's just our understanding of the way things are, but we can't say it's not normal. We don't know.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting when you were going over that study. That was really powerful for me because I'm kind of one of these guys who, if I hear two sides both making a case, I'll usually grab a little bit from each one of them and try to grab the positives from both and then mix it and create a hybrid as a way of hedging and as a way of hopefully grabbing the best of both worlds. But I think you answered with that study, that answers a line of questioning that I was going to make around mixing. So one of the big meals I do is fish or beef, and then I'll mix in some homemade sauerkraut and some seeds and nuts, beans, because I'm saying, okay, well, let's put all the different proteins in there. Let's put in something that will help it digest. I'll do enzymes. And now I'm creating insurance policies with redundancies. However, that doesn't factor in for the negative nutrients, like oxalates and phytates and lectins and the plant's defense mechanisms.
Right.
Do you agree that fermenting vegetables in a way kills the negatives and maybe increases some of the good guys? Or in and along those lines, pressure cooking, I heard, is very good for killing the negative nutrient negatives. If you still love eating beans, and where do you fall down on all that?
Yeah, I love sauerkraut. I take a bite of it every day, usually with every meal. Because the probiotics and so on, I think are very valuable. Not as good from pickled vegetables because the vinegar tends to kill off a lot of the bugs, but fermentation is fermented vegetables are really good.
I'm glad to hear that, because just on the surface of it, it just looks like very obvious, right? Where you're getting all the positives, the negatives have been metabolized, if you will, right, by the good buggies, and now they're just giving you good stuff that is nutrient dense.
Right. Which is why I'll never reach 100% carnivore, because I'll always include a little bit of sauerkraut.
A little bit of the ferments. Oh, that goes to the long-lived cultures too, because when you look at the blue zones, they seem to be. A matter of fact, the person who wrote in from Land O'Lakes. Okay, this speaks directly to that long-lived cultures. So certain cultures and geographic regions seem to be well known as far as long lifespans. For example, the Okinawans and the Mediterranean cultures and areas. Those diets seem to be primarily comprised of balanced diets of meats, seafoods, good fats, olive oil fats, certain kinds of carbs, fresh fruits and veggies. Are there other cultures and geographic regions where an all-animal protein diet has historically proven consistently to result in similar long lifespans as the blue zones?
One of the criticisms of this whole blue zone thing is there's a lot more going on than just the diet. These are socially integrated cultures. They have other healthy behaviors as well. So socialization, they're not smokers. There's a lot of other things going on with that. I'm really not up on the longevity data for other cultures. So I can't really speak to that.
Understandable. Understood. Yeah, I don't know. It's very, very curious that some of the Okinawan women, and consistently in their late 90s, and they're doing rice and fish. Maybe there's some synergy to the rice. I like putting a little white rice in my food because it's neutral, right? It doesn't have the negatives. And frankly, it helps with my stool. It helps with it gives me a nice little goose in the gym. A little bit of cheating, I know, but I've never fully adapted. So I'm not a reliable, I get to the 48-hour mark and the weight loss freaks me out. It's a psychological thing. There's nothing you can address with me, doctor, because it's a psychological thing. I start not liking what I look like when I lose 10, and you lose the weight, man. Man, if I was 230 and I was metabolically dysregulated, I probably am metabolically dysregulated, but I'm just not heavy. So I still need to do this. I do need to do this. I bet my visceral fat's not good. I do, man. I do.
Yeah, get it checked out. But yeah, I agree that if you're going to incorporate some carbs, rice is a good way to go. Sweet potatoes. And here's
what now? I'm surprised you like the sweet potatoes, because isn't that in the category of anti-nutrients or not?
I'm sure. Am I gonna?
So you're giving us some wiggle room. Is that what you're telling me?
Absolutely. And again, I feel good when I eat them, but I don't eat them regularly. It's very rare. But if I'm going to look for a starch, a carb, whatever, it's going to be rice or sweet potatoes. And you mentioned the Okinawans eating rice and so on. And what stands out about these carb sources is they're not processed. You cut out these processed foods. Go ahead and eat carbs. You're fine. It's really it's driven by so many other ingredients in those processed foods, the seed oils, the refined grains, the sugar. That's probably driving insulin resistance way more than the carbohydrate source itself.
We're running out of time. I want to give you another opportunity to tell people where they can get a hold of you. And I want to ask you if you'd be so kind as to come back on a future date, because we didn't get to constant glucose monitors. We didn't get to coronary artery calcium. We didn't get to HDL, LDL, vitamin K2. There's so much we need to get to, but
absolutely,
it's just there's so much here, and you're fascinating. I really, really appreciate the amount of work you've done to swim upstream, man. You're one of the heroes. You're the guys, you were talking about this when we opened up the show, how grateful people are because they weren't being given these options, and to know you don't have to spend how expensive insulin is and you don't have to do needles anymore and all that. Just the fact that you're doing that, and the fact that they fought you on, and they fight all doctors on giving this sensible, scientifically proven, scientifically efficacious information. It's a crime. It's a real crime. And I want to thank you for it. Must not have been comfortable at times. And just the extra work you did for no more money. Like, no one's paying you to do all this extra work and go into the library and learn all about this and to save lives. No one's paying you for it. So it's a kindness and it's appreciated. And, I speak hopefully we'll get this out into a couple thousand people's homes, and they'll be, checking this out. And so thank you for your swimming upstream, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I'd love to meet with you again, do another conversation. That'd be great.
Good. Let's do that. I'm going to hold you to that. Maybe in about 2 or 3 months, we'll circle back.
Okay. Sounds
Thank
good.
you, doctor. One more time.
Right.
One more time. Where can people, I know you also write for a website as well, right?
I used to write semi-regularly for Diet Doctor. I kind of let that slide because I'm focused now on my own business. And so all my efforts go into that now. So I'm the physician behind Revitalize Metabolic Health. I'm in Gig Harbor, Washington. And
do you do remote consultation? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Full disclosure, working across state lines has limitations. So I can't do, ordering labs, medications, making diagnoses, et cetera. But I can do health coaching, essentially across state lines.
Outstanding.
Just have to toe the line there.
Yeah, no, I get you.
But yeah, so revitalizemetabolichealth.com is my website. I have a blog up there with lots of articles. I write, weekly contributions there. I do have a weekly mailing list, a newsletter as well. You can find that on my Facebook or Instagram. There's links to that.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'll put some links in the show notes as well.
Sure.
Yeah. He's Dr. Christopher Stadtherr. Thank you so much, sir.
All right. Thank you, Jordan.
Talk again soon, Doc.
For our full schedule of fights on the NBC Sports Network, CW and ABC affiliates, visit UnitedFightAlliance.com. United Fight Alliance. United we fight.